Alright, so we are going to take this 12mm Rivoli and we are going to bezel that. A quick housekeeping note, I did take the time to put on some clear fingernail polish and let it dry on the back first before I got started. And what we are going to be doing is we'll be using the peyote stitch to bezel our 12mm Rivoli. In this case, I am using Delicas for the center spine. Oftentimes I do that, and then usually for the inner section, the 15-0s, I switch back and forth from either using round, or in this case I am going to be using Delicas. And they both work very, very well with each other. The one thing that is nice about using Delicas for the 15-0s is you do get a little bit extra room. So just keep in mind. I like texture, so that's why I like to change it up now and then. And to do my bezeling my 12mm Rivoli, first I'm going to take 30 Delicas and create a circle. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that up right now. And while I'm doing that, I did thread my needle, and I like to do, sometimes it's more than enough, it's extra. What I like to do is I like to do an arm span, from a wingspan I should say, from one arm to the other, and then I do about 1/3 of that for my tail. And here we go. So now I have 30 Delicas on my thread, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to loop it around, and I'm going to go through. Now sometimes I go through just the first bead, but in this particular case lately I've been going through the first 3. They just tend to lay a little bit better, but honestly, either way works. So if you just want to go through the first bead, you can. And I've created the circle. There we go. And then I slide it down to the stop bead. And what I'm going to do now, let me just get a little closer. There we go. And what we're going to do is every other bead, we're not going to go through every of these beads. Instead, we're going to skip every other bead, and where we skip, we are going to pick up another Delica and lay it next to it. So I'm coming out of this Delica right now, so I will skip this one, go through there, but when I skip this one, I will go ahead and pick up one Delica and go through it, the following Delica. There we go. So this one here I'm coming out of, and I'll skip this one and go through that one, but I will pick up a Delica to lay next to this one that I'm skipping. There we go. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. So I'm coming out of here. I'm skipping this one, picking up a Delica to lay next to it, and going through here. There we go. And I'm just going to do that all the way around. Meet me back here and we will finish up and do the step up together, okay? Alright, now we just are about to put on our final bead and step up. Okay, so right now I'm coming out of here. I'm coming out of this bead here. I'm skipping this one, putting a bead next to it, going through here. Then I will go through here, the very first bead that I put on for this round, and go through there for the step up, okay? There we go. So now that we've stepped up, the next step will be for us to put on our next round, and we are going to start putting on our 15-0s. So meet me back here with your 15-0s, and we'll get started on the next step. Alright, so now we're ready to go ahead and put on our 15-0s, and this is the easiest part. And again, you can use either round beads or Delicas. I do, and that also includes the spine. Now, if you do that for the spine, you might have to adjust the number, but the reason why I tend to like Delicas is you do get a lot more room, and it does create texture, and that's why I tend to like using Delicas for the spine. And I go back and forth on the inner part, just depending on the look I'm going for. So today I am using 15-0 Delicas. So you just pick up. I was coming out of my step up, the very first bead that I put on the previous row, and you just go through the next bead. So the bead that you put on will lie right on top of that center that doesn't have a bead next to it, so inside the notch. So I'm coming out of here, I'll pick up a bead, it's gonna lie on top of here in the notch, and I'm just gonna go through here, and I'll do that all the way around like that. So I'll do one more. So I'm coming out of here, this gold bead, I'm skipping the bead that's in the notch, and then going through the other gold bead sticking out. Alright, go ahead and do all of that. I'll meet you back here before we do the step up at the final bead, and we'll do the next step up, okay? One thing I did forget to mention is you do want to make sure that you are shaping this as you go along, so that way it's going to cover a round stone. Okay, so there's different ways you can do that. You can put this on a mandrel or a pen to create that shape. You can also use your finger. Just make sure as you're going along you are creating that shape, and you're giving it a little tug so things sit in the center. And with these being 15-0s, it will slowly shrink the circumference, so it'll make things tighter, just like a setting for the stone. Okay? Alright, so now we are about to put on our last and final 15-0 before our step up. So I'm coming out of this, I'm coming out of this gold bead here. I'm skipping the notch and adding my 15-0 on top of that, and then going through this next gold 11-0. And then for the step up, I will go through this 15-0 before I start the next round. There we go. And now I'm ready to go ahead and go all the way around. So I'm going to pick up a 15-0, coming out of this 15-0, placing the new 15-0 on top of this gold bead, and then going through this 15-0. So let me repeat that. I think I might have been out of frame. So I'm coming out of here, picking up a bead and laying it on top of this 11-0, and then going through here, this other 15-0, So just like before. There we go. There we go. Make sure the bead sits properly. Alright. And then you just end up doing that over and over just like we did. And then once you're done with that, go ahead and do the step up. If you want, you can go ahead and do a third row. I'm just going to do 2 rows. That seems to work really well for me with these the Swarovski Rivolis. But it's up to you and what look you're looking for. And then meet me back here. Thread your tail, and we'll get started on the back, okay? Alright, so just like we did with the front, we are going to be adding a bead in every notch. The only difference is I'm holding on to the stone to help keep it in place, so when it closes in around. And somewhere around this, so we'll go around with the 15 O's once, and then somewhere around the second row of 15 O's, it will start holding in place on its own. So what I recommend doing as we do this is just remember you're coming out of one of the beads sticking out, maneuver your thread and needle to that point, and then you're picking up a 15 0 to sit on top of the 11 0 Delica, and then you're going through the 11 0 sticking out. And it's just going to be just like you did with the front side. So once you're done with this row, you will then do the second row, and instead of being the 11 O's sticking out, it will be the 15 O's sticking out. So go ahead and do your 2 rows, and if you're doing a third row, which is optional, go ahead and do that. And then meet me back here and we'll do the reinforcing together, okay? So go ahead and do your 2 rows and then meet me back here. It's just like you did with the front side. The only difference is you're holding the stone in while you're doing your work. Okay? So once you've put on your 15 rows on the back, or if you're going to do 3 rows, and then meet me back here and we'll do our reinforcement. Alright, so once you're done bezeling the back, once you're done with all your bezeling, we're going to go ahead and reinforce. So what I've done is I made my way to the center of the spine. So I'm coming out of one of the Delicas side by side. And what I like to do is, as I'm coming out of here, since I'm coming out of this one, I like to go in on the other side. And then back through that same Delica that I was initially coming out of, and do it that way. And what that does is that brings these 2 side by side, and it just brings them all together. And then I just go through the very center spine up to the next 2 by 2 and repeat. So I'm going, and this is just my personal preference on how to reinforce. Everybody does things differently. So definitely check out what other people do. And, you know, what works best for you. However, I do recommend reinforcing however you prefer to reinforce. So I'm coming out of this Delica here, the 2 by 2. I'm going in through here. And then I'm going back up through that same Delica. And then going through the center. And I do that all the way around. And then what I'll do sometimes is then I will then move to the 15 O's, and then I'll show you how I reinforce that. So go ahead and do that all the way around, or however you prefer your reinforcing, and then meet me back here and I'll show you how I handle the 15 O's on the front and back. Alright, so I do the front and the back the same way for reinforcement. So make your way to your 15 O's, and right now I'm at one of the 15 O's that's sticking out. And what I like to do with like just a couple of them, not all of them, is I will do similar to what we did in the center of the spine. So I'm going through this 11-0 Delica, and then I just circle back to help pull things together. And then what I do for most of the throughout, I only do those to a couple of them, like 3 or 4 of them. Whoops. There we go. This is tight. Is I just go through it this way, so that way I'm going through the notch of the 15-0s and the sticking out 15-0s for the most part. So I'll do that for the most part, and just like I said, 3 or 4 of the sticking outs. Like for example, here we go, I'm sticking out, I'll go through that 11-0 right here, pull it together. And initially I used to do all the sticking outs that way. I found that it was a little too tight that way, and it was pulling a little too much. So then I decided to take a step back and just do a couple, and that seems to be working really nice. And you just sometimes have to adjust your beading style. You change over time. All right, so go ahead and do that with the front and the back, and then meet me back here. And I forgot to mention, so once you're done with reinforcing your front and your back, what you're going to want to do is go back to the center spine and basically weave in and out a few times, and then end your thread. Okay, try not to knot if you don't have to, but you want to create and go in several different directions, just so that way you can end your thread without it coming unraveled. Okay, and when you're done with that, you got your 12mm. Alright, so we are going to practice our cubic right angle weave before we get started. And the cubic right angle weave is something that it gives you a lot of versatility with a very simple stitch. So basically what you're doing is you're building upon the right angle weave. And the right angle weave is just circular motion on your bead weaving. Okay, so just for the sake of keeping things clear, a couple of things is that I'm going to refer to the right angle weave as a wall or floor or ceiling, and for the actual full cubic right angle weave I will refer to that as a unit. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with starting off with using right angle weave. Okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to build 4 walls of right angle weave. Okay, actually we'll start off with building 3 walls. The 4th wall we'll put everything together to create that square, that cube, and then we'll reinforce our ceiling and our floor, and then from there we'll build the next unit. Okay, so thread your needle and thread with whatever beads you want to use for practice. I'm using 8/0s. You just want to use something as uniform as possible for practicing, and it doesn't matter. You can use fire polish, you can use seed beads, whatever you find to be comfortable to work with, and you want them to be uniform in shape and size, I would also say. And then the second thing is just easy to see while you're practicing. Okay, alright, so we have our needle threaded and we have our first 4 seed beads. I did put a stop bead at the end. You can do that as well. This is just for practice. And what we're going to do is just like the right angle weave, we're going to create a circle by going through those beads again. And just like in my typical projects, I do like to reinforce, so we're going to go ahead and reinforce as we go along. So that very first bead you're going to go through 3 times, and we're just creating a circular motion with our needle and thread. So here's our first unit, and I'm coming out of and going through that first bead. And what I'm going to do, so this is our first wall. Okay, this is right angle weave at this point. And what I'm going to do is we're just going to refer to this as 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. So I'm going to maneuver down to 3 o'clock. So I'm going to use 3 o'clock to build my walls. It really doesn't matter which part of the clock you decide, whatever works for you. I generally, but you know, there's always exceptions to the case, try to pick a bead that is not the same as the bead I'm coming out of. Okay, and when you do that, follow the thread path that you've already created. So we're going a circular fashion. I wouldn't jump from here to here without going through this bead. So I'm at 3 o'clock, and I'm going to build my second wall of right angle weave. I have this 3 o'clock from the first unit will be my 9 o'clock. I'm sorry, this 9 will be my 9 o'clock for the second wall. So I just need to pick up 3 beads. I'm coming out of 9 o'clock. I'm going to go through 9 o'clock again. Then I'm just going to reinforce everything by following the same thread path that I had before. There we go. I did that. Now I want to wind up at 3 o'clock so I can put on my third wall of right angle weave. There we go. So I'm just going to move over to 3 o'clock. I'm at 3 o'clock. Again, this will become my 9 o'clock. Whoops, this will become my 9 o'clock for my third unit. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up 3 beads, go through, and reinforce. And again, I want to always wind up in this particular case at 3 o'clock again. So I reinforce. Now I just have to maneuver following the thread path to 3 o'clock. Okay, then we just take our beads, we fold them, and as you can see, we have, in this case, we have the 3 o'clock and we have the 9 o'clock. So we have 3 o'clock from the last wall we built and 9 o'clock of the first wall we built. So we just need 12 o'clock. So I'm coming out of 3. I'm grabbing 12 o'clock, so I'm adding a bead. I'm going through 9 o'clock. Then I'm going to grab 6 o'clock, add that, and go through 3 o'clock. And after I'm done, I'm just going to reinforce my stitch. There we go. Winding up at 3 o'clock again. Now that I've done that, I'm going to move to my basement. And my basement and my ceiling will have all the 4 beads there, but they're not going to be connected. So if you can see, there is no thread connecting these together. So what we're going to do is, you don't have to do this, but I do recommend it, and here's why. It gives you more structure. So we're going to reinforce that by going through at least once for the beads. So this will become my floor, because I'll turn it around and then maneuver to the ceiling after I've gone through and connected all 4 beads as a unit. There we go. So now we have all 4 beads connected. I'm going to turn this upside down. Now we have our sealing we have to do. So I'm just going to maneuver by following our already existing thread path. You don't want to ever create a new one in right angle weave or cubic right angle weave. And I'm just going to reinforce that. Again, it's not a requirement. It's just a good idea because it gives you structure. One reason why you may not want to is, let's say you want your beads to be a little bit more loosey-goosey as you're building. I suppose that would be a reason. I personally have not come across that situation. Doesn't mean it can exist, and that's what preferences are all about. Alright, so I just went through the entire ceiling and reinforced that. So now we have our cubic right angle weave. So we have our first unit. And the first unit is really truly the most difficult. Once you get that on, it gets a lot easier as you go along because it just builds on each other. So what we're going to do with this ceiling is this ceiling becomes our floor for the second unit. Okay? And so each of these beads here will build a wall on, and that will be our 6 o'clock. So as we go around, we're just going to turn around and go to the next 6 o'clock. Okay? So my first wall of the second unit, I have the 6 o'clock. I just need to add the other 3 beads. So the 9 o'clock, the 12 o'clock, and the 3 o'clock. So I added 3 beads. I'm going through 6 o'clock again. There we go. And this will stand up like this. Okay. And I'm going to reinforce that 1 bead at a time. There we go. It'll do a better job of standing up once we have the second wall on. There we go. So now we're going through 6 o'clock again. We have our first wall. I'm just going to follow the direction of my thread. And I'm going to move to the next 6 o'clock right here. And as we look at this 6 o'clock, you'll see that I have 6 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And depending on what direction you're moving, you might have 9 o'clock instead of 3 o'clock. So it just depends on which direction you moved in, okay? So now that I am at 6 o'clock, in this case, I just need to add 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead, pick up 2 beads, go through 3 o'clock. Whoops, let's not create a knot. Go through 6 o'clock. So I'm going to always end up at 6 o'clock for this, okay? Because that's where we start. And then I'm going to go ahead and reinforce those beads. I'm just going to turn this a little bit to make it a little easier to work with. Alright, so I reinforced. I'm at 6 o'clock. I just need to turn myself around to the next wall. Maneuver my way to the 6 o'clock for the next wall. This will be our third wall. Whoops. Sorry. There we go. It's a little hard to do this on camera. Alright, so we got 6 o'clock and 3 o'clock again. So I'm just going to pick up my 2 beads, go through 3 o'clock, reinforce. Well, first I got to go through 6 o'clock. Now I'm going to go ahead and reinforce, but making sure I end up at going through 6 o'clock. There we go. So I'm coming out of 6 o'clock. I'm going to turn it around and go through my final 6 o'clock. So this is the fourth wall. I have 9 o'clock, I'm missing 12. I have 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So I just have to add 1 bead. So first I'm coming out of 6, I'm going through 9 o'clock. I'm picking up 12 o'clock. And then I'm going through 3 o'clock. Making sure my thread doesn't get caught on anything. Then I'm going through 6 o'clock, so you always want to wind up at 6 o'clock again. And then I'll go through and reinforce that wall. It's a side wall. There we go. And we added a bead. So wherever you add at least 1 bead, you should go through 2 times to reinforce, depending on how much room you have in your beads. Alright, so now I'm just going to make my way to 9 o'clock here, because I'm going to come up to the ceiling and I'm going to reinforce that. And I'm just going to go through once because we have all 4 beads. Alright, so if we look at this, we've got 2 units, 1, 2. Alright, so let's go ahead and do a 3rd unit here. Alright, now that we finished our 2nd unit, we're going to treat this ceiling as our base for the 3rd unit. So each of these beads on top will be 6 o'clock for us. I'm coming out of here. So I picked up 3 beads, and then I'm going to go through the opposite side, because we're creating, this right angle weave is just creating that circle. And then I'm going to go ahead and just reinforce that 1 bead at a time. The reason why I'm doing the 1 bead at a time is that it does help it with the shape ultimately. There we go. So then I want to make sure I go through 6 o'clock for that final time. And then I just maneuver. So my thread is coming out this way. I'm going to turn this way to go to the next 6 o'clock. So I'm now going through the next 6 o'clock. And so because I'm going in this direction, I have 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So it just depends on what direction you're going in a circular fashion, what you'll wind up with. So I'm going to pick up 2 beads because I'm coming out of 6 o'clock. I want 3 o'clock and 12 o'clock. And then I'm going to go through 9 o'clock. I'm going to make sure I end up at going through 6 o'clock. And then I'm going to take the time to go ahead and reinforce that 1 bead at a time. So this is my 2nd wall of my 3rd unit. And I want to make sure I'm coming out of 6 o'clock. I follow the direction of my thread. I go to the next 6 o'clock for my 3rd wall. And I pick up 2 beads because that's what I'm missing. I go through 9 o'clock. And I want to make sure I end up going through 6 o'clock. I've completed my first rotation. I will then go through a 2nd time for reinforcement. Alright, so now I reinforced. And now I'm going to rotate in the direction my thread is going. I'm going to go through that 6 o'clock for my final wall. I have 3 o'clock and I have 9 o'clock and I have 6 o'clock. So all I have to do is add 12 o'clock when I get there. So I'm coming out of 6. I'm going through 3 o'clock because of the direction of my thread. I'm picking up 12 o'clock. going through 9 o'clock. I want to make sure I complete my rotation for my right angle weave. So I'm going to go through 6 o'clock again. Then I'm going to reinforce, because I did add a bead even though it was just one. Alright, so I've completed that. Now I'm going to go up to 3 o'clock to go to the ceiling, following the thread path that already existed. All the beads are there, so I'm going to just go around once, since that will be my reinforcement. And that will be my cubic right angle weave. And let's just count the number of units we have. So when you look at this, I like to count 12 o'clock. So I got 1, 2, 3. Alright, so let's say we want to do a 90-degree turn. And so what you want to do is think about which direction you want to go. For us, since we don't have another 9-degree turn or another going in a different direction, we can technically pick any of the 4 sides here. So instead of continuing to go straight, we're going to go in this fashion here, come out this way. Alright, my recommendation is that when you do that, you want to follow the thread path that already exists, and you want to pick one of these 4 beads. I suggest picking the innermost bead because it'll be easier to take care of that and do away with that at the very onset than try to go back in, especially when you're in that little tight corner doing it with smaller beads. Okay, so I'm coming out of this bead right now. And other than that, it's going to be the same thing. So I'm just going to I'm going to use this as my floor. So these 4 beads will be my 6 o'clock for all the way around. Let me get a little closer here. Alright, so this will be my 6 o'clock for each of my walls. And for my first wall, I have 6 o'clock, so I just need 3 beads. So I'm going to go ahead and grab 3 beads. I'm going to go through the 6 o'clock again, because you always want to end up coming out of 6 o'clock. Alright, then I'm going to take the time to go ahead and reinforce that wall, that right angle weave wall, just by going through 1 bead at a time. And then I'm going to go through 6 o'clock, just like we do with everything else. We'll go through 6 o'clock. And since my thread is coming in this direction, I'm going to turn this way to go to my next 6 o'clock. So just follow the direction of your thread. So now I'm going to this 6 o'clock. And since I'm going to hold it this way, I have 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So I just need, I have 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So I just need 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock. I'm coming out of 6. I'm going to go through 3 o'clock. I add my 2 beads at the same time. Oops. There we go. And then I'm going to go through the 6 o'clock again. So you always want to end up coming out of that 6 o'clock. Then I'm going to go through each bead one at a time. Making sure I wind up going through my 6 o'clock again. So I'm going through my 6 o'clock again. I'm going to turn, since my thread's coming this direction, I'm turning in this direction to put on my 3rd wall, coming out of 6 o'clock. I have 6 o'clock and 3 o'clock, so I'm going to pick up 2 beads. Then I'm going to go through 3 o'clock. Then I want to make sure I end up by going through 6. Since that's my first round, I will go ahead and reinforce that. Making sure I come out at 6 o'clock. Alright. I follow my thread path. My thread is coming out this way. I'm going to go to 6 o'clock, the next 6 o'clock. And I have 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, but I'm missing 12 o'clock. So I'm going in this direction with my thread. So I'm just going to follow the direction of my thread. I'm going through 9 o'clock. I'm going to pick up 12 o'clock since I don't have it. Then go through 3 o'clock. Oops. Then I'm going to go through 6 o'clock again. And then since that was the first time I went around, I'm going to go ahead and repeat that. And as you can see how much easier it is to do this with having it facing on the outside than trying to deal with it on the inside, especially when you're working with much smaller beads. There we go. And just like with the other units, we're going to make our way to the top, our ceiling, and we're going to go ahead and reinforce those beads. Whoops. There we go. Sorry about that. So I made my way to the top. I'm just going to go around, just like we did before, and just reinforce our 4 beads. And then you just keep building along those lines. Alright, so now we've done our bezeling of our Rivoli. We've practiced our right angle weave unit. We're ready to get started with making your frame. So go ahead, grab your 11/0s, and then this is where you're going to use your 3-pound or 4-pound thread. Anything thicker than that will be difficult to reinforce and to do this whole project. So just keep that in mind. So when you're doing this, what you're going to want to do is put on, measure your thread to about 2 wingspans. Divide that in half and put your stop bead in the hat, the very center. And what we're going to do, just like in our practice, we're going to make a straight line, okay, going in one direction. In that particular case, you're going to do a total of 8 units, okay? So you count your units like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then once you've got your 8 units, go ahead, make a 90-degree angle turn, and then do another 8 units. So you'll count the very base a second time and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Once you got your 2 sides, meet me back here and we'll go ahead and do the turn. Keep in mind, this is basically a square just turned on the side to create the diamond, okay? This particular diamond. So this diamond has 4 90-degree turns. Alright, so go ahead and do that. Meet me back here. And just the FYI, you will be adding thread quite frequently through this project because it does use a lot. And then we'll go ahead and work this all out together, okay?